We're going to continue to study with the 10th bracha, Tikab b'shofar. Yesterday we looked at the verse from Isaiah, Yitakab b'shofar gadol. God, perhaps, although it's in the passive voice, will blow on the great shofar, and sounding the great shofar is sort of the indicator that we've arrived at the Bayom Hahu, on that day in the future, when everything changes. What I wanted to look at today, and it may actually go into tomorrow as well, is the word cherutenu. Tikab b'shofar gadol lecherutenu. In the verse we saw yesterday from Isaiah, the word cherut or cherutenu doesn't appear. So I want to understand how the word lecherutenu, blow the great shofar for our freedom, for our cherut, or on behalf of our freedom, how does that sort of add additional understanding to this bracha? And it's an interesting word because it doesn't actually appear in the Bible. It's not a biblical word, and we're going to see sort of how it appears in our bracha, which is almost always taken from words from the Bible. So I'm going to share the screen. Yeah, just to remind us that the first line of the bracha, Tikab b'shofar gadol lecherutenu, and then looking at the commentary from Abu Draham, again, the Spanish commentator in the 14th century, who did the work of connecting the Siddur to the verses in the Bible. So he says lecherutenu al shem. That's based on the following verse from Isaiah, a different verse than we looked at yesterday, from chapter 61. Likro lashvuyim dror, to call for the captives a dror, a freedom, which is not the word cherut, but then he tells us v'targum dror is cheruta. In another place, the word dror is used in Leviticus 25. The Targum, the early translation of the Torah into Aramaic, translates the word dror into the word cherut, into the word that we're looking at. So what we're getting here is that there's a synonymous relationship between the Hebrew word dror and the Aramaic word cherut, and for whatever reason, our bracha chooses the word cherutenu as opposed to, drorenu or something like that. That is to say, you would have expected the Hebrew word dror to show up here, especially in the way that Abu Draham is quoting a couple verses in the Bible in which that word dror appears, and yet we see the Aramaic word instead. There's a theory that's floating out there that once in a while, the words in our prayer book actually are taken from the Targum, from the Aramaic translation of the Bible, and not just the Bible itself. This is put forward by Menachem Kister, who's a professor at Hebrew University. And this might be a good example of that, is that it seems like cherut, we sort of experience the word cherut as a Hebrew word now, and we'll see where that comes from tomorrow, perhaps. But it really is, at least as it relates to the word freedom, it doesn't show up in the Bible as meaning freedom, and nevertheless, cheruta in Aramaic is the synonym for dror. So, and we see this also in the Sifra way before Abu Draham in the rabbinic commentary and midrashim on the book of Leviticus. Ukratem dror, on that verse in Leviticus 25:10. The Midrash translates that as ein dror ela cherut. They're making an equivalency between the older Hebrew word dror and the newer Hebrew word cherut, which again has that sort of cognate in Aramaic, cheruta. Okay, so this is trying to get us to understand what is the nature of the freedom that we are going to ask for in this bracha. And what I'm saying is, once you make the connection between cherut and dror, then you're opening up all of the associations with dror itself, which we're going to look at in just a moment. But what I wanted to show you is that if you would expect the word dror in our bracha and instead got the word cherut, it so happens that there are some versions of our bracha in which the word dror does appear in addition to cherut. And I wanted to just show you that it shows up in Seder of Amram Gaon. Seder of Amram Gaon is the earliest Siddur in Jewish history, but the trouble with that Siddur is the words of the actual liturgy, as opposed to the halachic instructions that surround the words, are probably not original to Rav Amram, who lives in the 9th century. So it's hard to know exactly how old these textual witnesses are. They're not as old as the 9th century, but you do have there in all the versions of Seder Rav Amram Gaon, Ukra dror lekabtzenu, or Vatikra dror lekabtzenu. It sort of shows up in the middle of the bracha. There it is. Call out a freedom. Call out a drawer. Ukratem drawer. That's the pasuk in Vayikra. So that's something we might have expected, and we got the word cherut instead. And lo and behold, it shows up here in some version of this. I brought you, just because it's fun, I brought you from the Geniza. This is not Seder Rav Amram Gaon, but a fragment that was discovered in the Geniza. It's pretty readable, actually, and I circled for you the kra drawer. So I'll just read it to you. Tika b'shofar gadol l'cherutenu, v'sanetz l'kibbutz galuyotenu. And then that sounds exactly like our bracha. And then we have kra drawer, v'kabtzenu yachad me'arbakan fotar. So it's almost like inserted in the normal flow of this bracha that we have kra drawer. So you have this, it's almost like synonymous with cherutenu, is asking God to declare the freedom. So when we're talking about drawer, and if we think of cherut as a synonym for drawer, whether it appears exactly, explicitly like it does in this Geniza text, or whether it's implied, as Abu Draham points to us, that cherut equals drawer, that the Sifra says cherut equals drawer. So what does drawer mean? What kind of freedom are we talking about? So I wanted to look with you for a minute at chapter 25 of Vayikra, or at least the selection that talks about the drawer. And those of you who learned with me during in advance of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, this also might be familiar, because it's one of the few psukim that talks about shofar as it relates to what kinds of blasts you blow, and it's going to sort of connect the drawer, the freedom, and the shofar. Tzikapa shofar gadol l'cherutenu. So let's see what it is here. The context is the Jubilee year. So let's get the understanding of what is the freedom that the Jubilee year is allowing us to experience. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. So the 7 cycle times 7, you get 49 years. And then v'ha'avarta shofar trua b'chodesh shvi'i. Then you shall sound the loud horn, or the horn loud, shofar, in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the day of atonement. You shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. This is the Yovel. This is the 50th year that's going to be Kodesh. And what happens? Ukratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveh. You shall proclaim a freedom, a dror, cheruta, throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to his holding, and each of you shall return to his family. This returning here is part of what we're talking about in our bracha. That is to say, what is the practical import of the jubilee? It's not only that the land is set aside, but also that everybody's going to return to their original state. Okay, so the image here that we have of the drawer is, it's not freedom in sort of like a vague sense. It's a returning to the original state that we're meant to be experiencing. That 50th year you shall be a jubilee for you. Shall not sow, shall not reap the aftergrowth or harvest or the untrimmed vines, for it's a jubilee. So in that way it functions like a shemitah, like a sabbatical year. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. But then we get also, in this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his holding. So the returning to land, tikab shofar gadol lecherutenu. The cherut here, the freedom, is the freedom to be able to return to our original holdings. And in that way, it's that kind of freedom. Later, the Jubilee year also includes the freedom from debt. And that's another thing that we're going to look at tomorrow. But I just wanted to end with the comment of Jacob Milgram. We've looked at him, the scholar on Leviticus, who describes something fascinating about the word drawer, which he was saying is that he actually connects it to some other ancient Near Eastern languages. In contrast with all ancient Near Eastern anduraru, that's drawer, but in I think Akkadian, I can't remember exactly, or in another language, misarum, proclamation. So in contrast, everybody had such a thing as a jubilee. The difference is that the biblical jubilee was cyclical, ordained by God and not by an earthly ruler according to his whim or need, and could not be revoked or circumvented. That is to say, every ancient society, says Milgram, had the concept of a drawer, of a freedom. The difference is that in all the other societies, the king would declare this jubilee whenever it worked for the king. If the king was wanting to gain favor with the people and returning them to their original land, so the king would proclaim an anduraru, and therefore everybody would be able to return. The contrast in the Bible is that it's set up as a natural cycle, so that no matter what the human king is doing or what the ruler is doing in that moment, every 50 years, everyone's going to go back to their land. So there's sort of like a cycle that goes beyond human connection and power that is being called upon when we evoke the biblical drawer, which I'm arguing is what we're saying when we say Tikah b'shofar gadol l'cherutenu, when we're asking God to sound the great shofar l'cherutenu, for our drawer, kra drawer, call out a freedom, but not just a sort of a vague freedom, but a freedom that allows us to return to our land, which of course is the theme of these brachot. That's about a return that we're going to get to. So we're probably going to explore a little bit more on drawer further tomorrow, look at some midrashim around it. But for now, just wanted to lay the groundwork of how it appears in our bracha.